On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Helena. And Helena was married to a goalpost moving Mr. Right. It's a story of intergenerational trauma, control disguised as care, the fog, gaslighting, feeling defective, and the need for approval. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have Helena. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. And if you want to be a guest like Helena is today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Click on the guest form button at the top of the page, fill out the guest form, and press the submit button, or email us at narcissistapocalypse@pm.me. Also, at our website, we have a newsletter that is a very informative newsletter that has to do with this week's episode, every week's episode. And you receive a free workbook in that newsletter as well. People find it very helpful and informative. And also at our website, you can find that we have a support group at narcissistapocalypse.com, and we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday night, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. And if you want to join our support group, go to narcissistapocalypse.com. And we do have a content warning for today, as Helena's story has physical abuse in it in her first marriage, and it is a very brief mention. So before Helena got into the next relationship she was in, she thought abuse had to be physical. So it was hard for her to detect abuse at all growing up in these chaotic environments that she was in. And the abuse that she endured during this relationship, everything was disguised as care. So it took a very long time for Helena to see what was happening and who she was actually dealing with. So there was a lot of different tactics that were going on being used against Helena, and I'm sure many of you will be validated by her story today. So a big thanks to Helena for being here once again. And now I'm going to get out of my way and your way. Helena, the floor is now yours.
Hi, Brandon. Thanks for having me. I am 48 years old. I have my daughter now is almost 14, and I had her when I was 35, and I call her my miracle child. So that will play a part into this story. I will start with just a little bit of a background because I do think it plays into why I make choices in my adult years. And so, yeah, my parents were both born into a Mennonite religion and culture. They were in a very strict Mennonite sect, and that likely formed who they were. And that is why they made the decisions they did. They met each other and married at around age 19 or 20. I was born a couple years later. Their marriage was tumultuous. There was lots of abuse. There was violence in the home directed towards my mom. And because of that, my mom was in survival mode most of my childhood, and that affected our relationship. My dad was oftentimes an absentee father. He was a truck driver on the roads a lot. From what I've been told, he was an unfaithful man and he wasn't good with money, didn't send money home. So my mom was basically single parenting most of the time. When he was home, there was violence, threats of violence, and the threats of violence became quite extreme. We did move away from that Mennonite community and started to venture off into more what you could call, I guess, normal lifestyle. Still at home, there was a lot of chaos and violence, and now we're away from family, a little more isolated. And my dad's threats were getting stronger and stronger. He would threaten suicide often. So after school, there would oftentimes be church members in her living room praying for my dad and, trying to convince him to not commit suicide. These threats were pretty severe. My mom was often afraid. He would often threaten that he would basically off our family. I would hear this. I would hear that in the home. He would get angry and threaten my mom that if, all it would take is that take that hunting rifle out and we would be done. So there was the fear of him committing suicide and the fear of him killing us. And I believe it was when I was in grade 2, we were living on a farm where my father was working at the time, and he did grab his hunting rifle, and that is when he pointed it at my mom, and she told me and my 2 younger sisters to run and flee to the nearest home. And I remember holding my little sister's hands and just running. And I just said, please don't turn around, let's just run. And we ran and ran. And I don't really remember what happened. I guess we got to our neighbor's home. I think the church family was called again, and they intervened and calmed my father down. I don't recall that police were called. They may have, and I just don't remember. Our life went on. They persevered through their marriage, I guess. It was scary. It wasn't better. Things didn't necessarily get better. My father, again, he was absentee at times. And then a few years later, we were now living in a small city, and my mom took me and my sisters, still elementary school age, and we fled the home, and she took us to a women's shelter because it was no longer safe. Once again, there was a safety problem. There was my father threatening violence. And so we lived in a shelter for a couple of weeks, I believe. I don't know if they did some therapy. Somehow we all lived together again, and Dad was back in the picture. They did a vow renewal. Religion played a big part in my life. We weren't practicing the Mennonite religion so much anymore, but we were now involved in a Pentecostal church and, fully immersed. I was in the youth group. I was in after school kids clubs, and then later into youth groups. And I have a complicated history with religion, but I do believe it played a significant enough part in my life that it probably it kept me on a good path. I thank goodness I had the church community because, things were not good at home. I can just say that. And once again, the church community came in and they counseled my father and my mom, and they did a vow renewal. We were all so excited. We thought my dad had changed. And by junior high, it was bad again. My dad just was a very abusive, chaotic, unstable man and just wreaked havoc in our family. And it was unsafe. So by high school, they were divorced. They divorced finally, and it was such a relief. By then, I knew it was the answer. My mom had to divorce that man. And so I never had a very close relationship to my father, obviously. There were times I had a difficult time with my mother. During this whole time, I think she was so focused on surviving and just meeting our basic needs, keeping us safe, keeping us fed. She was managing to get herself through some more education so she could provide better for us. She did the best she could, but it did create a huge disconnect in our mother-daughter relationship. I believe that we didn't bond the way a mother and child should in utero, and then in my infant years, and then my childhood. We have done a lot of work to overcome that, and I give my mom a lot of grace because she was a victim of abuse. And I just think in those circumstances, you do the best you can. And her and I have had many conversations over it, and lots of forgiveness and lots of healing. So I will say my mom and I have come through a lot. And before I move on, I will even say my father and I have had lots of conversations. He is in severe declining health. He has asked for forgiveness. He has apologized. It is basically a miracle, even though I'm an atheist now, so I use that word, I guess, not in the truest sense of the definition, but it is a miracle that our family has come through that type of abuse, and we can now even have Christmases together with the grandchildren. My mom is a strong woman, and she has found it in her heart to forgive him. My dad has asked for forgiveness. In his older years, I guess he has calmed down and he has regrets. And if we could all go back, they would do it all differently again. And so I will leave that there, but just giving you an idea that I came from a very chaotic and abusive household. And I do have that father wound, that abandonment wound that I don't think ever goes away in a daughter or in any child.
So you have this abandonment wound. Chaos has been normalized for you, or the ability to live in chaos and know how to maneuver within chaos for you might feel like something you know how to do. So if it were to come up, it's something you have experience with of how to kind of maneuver around in it. And other issues that could have been created right here in your mind, I guess I'm not going to use the word issues, but what were you like looking for? And, obviously abandonment is one thing, and you're looking for a partner, you're looking for love. Are you looking to be appreciated? Are you looking to, if some people become achievers, some people become people pleasers, what are you looking for someone to see in you, or you just want to kind of be chosen?
Yeah, chosen that is that's the word. I think I just wanted to feel seen and loved, like you said. And with my religious upbringing, of course, I have the background narrative that God will send me a husband and I will be that wife. So, but not navigating that without any reference, no sense of reference. I had nobody to look to know what a good husband would look like, what a good man looks like. And it's exactly that. I was set up for chaos and it was all normalized. And my nervous system was completely accustomed to chaos. So that when chaos did enter my life, I didn't even know it was chaos. It was comfortable. It was easy. And I hate to say that, but it was. I eased right into that relationship, and that would lead me into my first marriage. I believe I was just about 20 years old. I had met this first husband around that time. We had met, interacted, but we did not form a relationship. Somewhere in there, I moved to a city. He's in town. He wants to meet me, and he's sort of, whining and dining me. And he was very attractive. I was very attracted to him. It was easy to fall in love with that guy. He was smooth. He was a good-looking man. He said all the right things. He was funny, but he was a disaster from the beginning. And I wish I could say I should have seen the red flags. I absolutely did not. I just thought, okay, this is what men are like, and we moved in together. And there was, I should have known early on he was a full-blown addict, alcoholic. But as we prolonged our relationship and eventually got engaged and married, I did start to see, I started to wonder, this can't be normal. Can't be drinking every weekend and all the time, but his drinking definitely progressed. And his verbal abuse was early on, but I took it no problem. I'm the kind of person who I look at myself and think, well, did I do something to deserve this? I would try to change my behavior, but with that type of abuse, it doesn't matter. He would get drunk and escalate, and then we married in that time frame. I can't believe it now, but I did want to have a child. I had difficulty getting pregnant, so I was on some infertility medications, and it still didn't happen for us. And he only escalated, his abuse escalated, his verbal abuse escalated, and it did turn into physical violence. But he would sober up the next day and be so apologetic and so sweet and be so kind, and he would have no recollection, and the cycle would continue. And it only got worse. I still did not recognize this as abuse, but I did notice that there was an alcohol problem. And He agreed he'd go to rehab. And he was actually very agreeable, way more agreeable than I could have imagined. I thought we were on the same page. He was so nice. It was so calm. And then one day I came home from work, just a few days later, he was drunk, house had been trashed, and he chased me around the house, and that was it. That was the final assault. I ran to the neighbors as quick as I could. By the time I got there, they had already called police. They were on their way. They had heard the screaming. And from there, he fled. He fled the property, and there was a warrant out for his arrest. And inevitably, we all had to go to court, and I had to testify in court, and my neighbors testified as witnesses. And apparently, there were other witnesses. And when you're living in that kind of abuse, the neighbors hear, and I never knew. I just was in a state of survival, I suppose. I thought I had it handled. I thought it was in control. My mother got me out of that house. We had a U-Haul there the next day, and they had me packed up and moved out, and that was that. And it was very painful for me because I was still in a place where I thought I loved him, and I thought maybe we could repair this. I mean, it just sounds crazy to think that I thought that, but at that time I did. And then a few months later, I found out that he had been unfaithful to me many times, and actually there was a woman pregnant, and so that was a real kind of knife in the heart. But I guess, I should be thankful that we never had children together, and I am, because it would have been awful. But my desire to have children was always there. It was a painful divorce. I went into some group therapy with there was 12 of us in total, and it was one of the best therapies I've ever had. There was many of us that had fled domestic abuse. There was a lawyer in the group, a therapist in the group. It just showed me that it can happen to anyone, and it was very healing.
So here you are, you've gone to therapy, you are learning what you think abuse is, or I'm going to rephrase that, but I'm going to say you're learning here a specific type of framework of what abuse is and how it looks. But abuse doesn't always look one way. So you're learning these things, and from what we discussed in our pre-call, you thought you kind of had that a little bit figured out, knowing what these things look like. So you have that going on. What are you looking for in your next relationship? Are you looking for your next relationship? Because you've already had a lot of stuff go on throughout your life. So you're looking for a rest at any point, or you're just like, I want to have a family, so this is like a priority for me?
Yeah, it kind of was. So after that, I felt like I had some therapy under my belt. I started to feel confident again. And I knew I wanted a child, and I wanted that family life, that loving, close-knit family. And I did meet my second husband, and that is my daughter's father. And I met him a couple years later, and through a friend. So we were introduced to each other, and we became friendly with each other. I think our relationship started off at a friendship level. It did grow slowly. So, I hear the word love bombing a lot. I don't know that I experienced love bombing, but he did really listen to me, and I felt so heard and special that he just let me talk, and we bonded over conversations on philosophy. At this point in my life, I am starting to deconstruct my faith, and I'm on a journey of deconstruction to some type of spirituality, and I landed with feeling comfortable calling myself an atheist. And he was kind of on the same journey, give or take, and we had that in common. I would share my past too. I felt that he felt open to me, that I felt open that I could share with him about my childhood somewhat, and my divorce and the abuse I endured. And he seemed so concerned and responsive, and he validated me. I felt so heard. He also shared some things with himself, and I found that to be so forthcoming. It was basically like he was confessing to me some things that he had done in his past, and he had also been previously married, no children, and we had that in common. And he kind of told me where he thought he went wrong in that marriage, and he told me he had been unfaithful to her, and he knows that was wrong. He would never do that again. He actually would go seek out sex workers in the massage adult massage parlors or whatever. And he said that was a weakness of his. He had a bit of a porn addiction, but he's got it under control. He's got help and he's seeing a therapist. So I just thought, well, that's great. He wouldn't tell me that if he wasn't on the right track or if he didn't believe it. So I just thought, well, he must trust me enough to say that to me. And I felt he was being so open and honest that, I mean, that he wouldn't do that to me. I know it seems so naive, but I mean, I just thought he was so forthcoming. And so our relationship carries on. It's a lot less drama than the first marriage. So I took that as a good sign. At one point, we did have a pregnancy about a year in, and it ended in miscarriage, and it bonded us even more. He definitely wanted a child after that, and we were committed to having a child. We were not yet married, but that was in the talk. We were planning on getting married, and we were going to have a child. And then less than 2 years later, my little miracle baby comes along. So yeah, I'm a new mom. And so this takes me to about age 35, and we're still in a relationship, and we live together, and our relationship is now about 3 years old, I believe. There was so much, I guess the word gaslighting, he was not like my first husband. He never really yelled or would swear, or he was not a drinker. He wasn't volatile. It was just little messaging. I couldn't do anything right. So it just would start with that. Every day there was constant criticisms, and they started slowly. And I took them as, okay, well, he loves me. He's just pointing something out, and I'm happy to change. I will make my little changes. So because I didn't see an issue with that. I mean, it wasn't volatile. It was so almost like it was helpful. He was my helper. He was just showing me, oh, that's wrong. How about try it this way? And so I took it as good advice at first. And I adapted pretty quick to that. I think it probably did get worse after my daughter was born. I was postpartum, and the birth itself was a little scary. I spent some time in the hospital, and it took me a while to recover. But as we eased into parenthood, it just got so much worse. I can give you an example. There's one example that just pops into my mind, and it seems so benign, but it's what it means to him. So I would come home from the grocery store with my little baby in her little car seat, the little baby car seat, and I put the car seat down. I'd stumble into the house with all these bags of groceries, and I'd get them into the kitchen, and I would unpack the groceries. In the meantime, I'm tending to my little baby, and she's still happy in her little car seat, so I left her in there. And the shoes are in front of the door, and I did not put my shoes away quite yet. I hadn't even finished unloading the groceries. I hadn't even gotten my child out of her car seat. And he came home from work, and he opened the door, and I guess he thought he was going to trip over those shoes. He didn't, but he could have. And the fact that he could have tripped over those shoes set him off. And I got the longest lecture about how insensitive I am and how that is considered poor behavior. How could I not think of him? I should have known he was on his way home from work. And I took it as, I mean, he was right. That was an oversight. How I felt terrible. I would not want him to trip, of course. But I did explain to him, like, just so you know, I just got in the house myself. I'm just unloading the groceries. I haven't even been able to I hadn't had the chance to tidy up behind me. And that was just one criticism that really sticks in my mind, because I just couldn't understand why this reaction to that. Like, it certainly wasn't on purpose, but it was a huge reaction on his side. And I just took it as, I need to do better. Okay, there. Mental note, don't leave the shoes out. I can do that. It's not going to hurt me. I should be more sensitive to his needs. So there was one time where I had to start to learn to follow his rules. But the problem was his rules would change daily. The next day it was something else, and then something else, and then something else. He would say to me, you can't see reality. And then I remember him taking a pen and paper and drawing a circle, and then drawing an arrow into the circle, put my name in that circle and say, this is you. You can't see reality. Your perception is subjective. I'm on the outside. He draws an arrow and he draws himself on the outside of that circle, and he would say, he's objective. And I would think, okay, well, maybe I'm not seeing this right. Like, I could be wrong. And so I did believe him. I still believed he had the best of intentions for me. And, I was reminded by him many times that I was the one that came from that abusive marriage. And I did have a chaotic upbringing. So maybe I'm not the best one to know what is reality. And thank goodness he was here to show me. And he would say throughout our whole relationship, he is here to show me my blind spots. And he's here to help me grow. And he wasn't wrong. I was from an abusive marriage, and I did have a chaotic upbringing, and I'm happy to grow. Maybe it is time for some growth and some self-growth. And that first marriage of mine, I certainly didn't have time to self-reflect and grow as a person, as I was in survival mode that whole time. So he wasn't wrong. Another argument that would come up often is how emasculating I was. I could never make him feel like the man he wanted to be. And, that one confused me because I'm pretty girly. I was a stay-at-home mom for years, but, my main career has been I'm a self-employed nail tech. I've worked in the spas. I'm an esthetician. I do nails at home. I love to wear makeup. I am as girly as they come. So this idea that I was never feminine enough or he was never masculine enough confused me. I'm not sure where that came from. He would read self-help books all the time about masculinity, asserting his masculinity. There is a deep-rooted issue there, I believe, for him. And it was definitely very confusing for me. And I would go on trying to always measure up. There was nothing I could do to make him happy. And I did feel like it was a failure on my part. I thought I was not good enough, that I was somehow defective, and it brought me back to my first marriage thinking, well, maybe the problem is me here. I had to start to consider that maybe I am the problem. Maybe I am just hard to live with, unlovable, and that father wound is still there. I feel very like unlovable, and these men just don't love me, and I make it hard for them. So I had this constant self-talk in my head where I would have my second husband's voice in my head and then my own voice in my head, and it was like an argument in my own mind, and it was exhausting. I even remember I would Google how to be a good wife. What are some tips on how to be a better wife? Where am I going wrong? I was ready to exhaust all avenues to be a better person and to be a better wife. Our arguments would often end up where I'm just defensive. So I would try to attempt to defend myself, but that would be turned against me, and he would just accuse me of being defensive. So if I'm being defensive, how will I learn? If I need to stop being so defensive and listen to him and learn what he's trying to teach me. And then I would feel terrible because he was right. I was defensive. I was always so defensive. And why do I need to defend myself?
So right here, at this point of the relationship, you are dealing with someone who is finding fault with everything. He is moving goalposts. You're never going to do anything right, and it's always going to be something new that you have to achieve. He's become the truth teller in a huge way. He's used your past relationship and upbringing to make you feel less than. There's a kernel of truth that this exists, and now he's going to wrap that kernel of truth and he's going to really wrap it up in a lie and use gaslighting to exert control over you. And, your thought process right now is going to be to defer your thoughts to him because he knows best. And that's the environment that he has created. He's created this pedestal where you are looking up and he is looking down and telling you what to do. And he does a really good job of manipulating you into believing this. He wants you to listen to everything he says, that he's right about everything. And at this point, I don't think he's raised his voice. So it's the opposite of your previous relationship so far. And I say so far as that will change, but it's hard for you to pinpoint this as abuse right now. It's not coming off as what you picture abuse to be based upon what you've seen previously in your life. He's framing it as he has your best interest at heart. And you trust this person, and you have no reason not to trust this person. So you're thinking of these things as this is caring. So he's disguising his control here as care. And this is really able to take hold. And then he has this superiority about him. He really wants to be a man. He has these issues when it comes to being a man and gender roles and taking charge. And he has you in this spot of wanting to be a great wife. So these things have already kind of taken control, or these things have already been pretty dominant within this relationship. And these things are unseen. The abuse is going on, but it's very much unseen, the manner in which it has been done. So at this point, does rage eventually show itself, and do things escalate from here?
He would speak so monotone, but I could tell underneath he's raging and seething, and he would monologue. He would just lecture me and talk and talk and talk and for hours, and I had to listen. I could not interrupt because interruption was a sign of disrespect. And if I got defensive, that just made it more clear to him how wrong I was. And his eyes would always go really dark and tense. And so his pupils would just dilate. And I always noticed that about him. And he would just reiterate to me daily how I just couldn't see reality. So it was really like basically making me feel mentally ill. So my mental state of mind, if he could attack my mental state of mind, I believe, then he could have me questioning everything. He just created a narrative that I was so unstable. I was not a good wife. The last place he could strike a nerve would be me as a mother. And at this point, I was already feeling like I was going to have to possibly check myself into a psych ward or go back to therapy or see a psychiatrist or something, because if I was as crazy as he was telling me I was, then I shouldn't have a child in my care. He wouldn't attack outright. He would just nitpick everything I did, but also be of no help. Like I would be overwhelmed. So she was just under the age of 2. So that's a hectic time. I'd be overwhelmed with everything, and yet he was no help. He had a list of things I needed to do, behave, and things I needed to do in the household. It was constant nagging. I mean, yes, there was a laundry basket of clothes that needed to be folded. I hadn't gotten to it yet. Yes, the dishwasher needs to be unloaded. I hadn't gotten to it yet. And I'm tending to my daughter the whole time. I mean, any stay-at-home mom knows that there's no timeline. You're just going from task to task. And I was never enough. I never got it done according to how he wanted things done. And he just made me feel frazzled and scattered. And in that state, I felt like I must be a terrible mother. I mean, why else would he be? What is his problem here? Like, obviously, I'm not tending to our child like he thinks I should. I remember asking him once if he could just please give me one criticism a day, because it was just getting to be too much. And it sounds absolutely ridiculous that I even had to have that conversation. And again, in this cycle of constant criticism, some days he would sit me down and he'd have notes made, and he wanted to review those notes and tell me where I needed to improve and how, my poor behavior. He used that term, poor behavior, often. If I didn't measure up, he would definitely withhold affection and give me the cold shoulder. And the silent treatment happened all the time. I remember one time it happened for at least over a week, and my little daughter was still an infant. So, I carried her around all day. We were joined at the hip. And so in order for him to effectively give me the silent treatment, he then also had to ignore our daughter because she was attached to me. And that always struck me as odd that he would take it to that length. I mean, you're her father. Don't you want to interact with your daughter? And so that meant he had to ignore us both. And that hurt. That made me sad for her, because I knew then also that in a way, I think she was she's an accessory for him. Having her was a way for him to feel masculine. So that was, a check mark for him. He could feel more masculine. He's a father now. Men have children. That was a very manly thing to have, is a child.
So these abuses are going on in one way. You're doing a lot of things out of guilt initially. You feel bad. You're not doing these things right for him. So guilt is there. You also have your wifely duty that is involved. So obligation is heavily in here as well. We've heard that shame is induced about your past. So you start to believe that he's right and you should listen. Life could go much better. Things sound like they've escalated a little already, but some events are about to happen that take this up a notch. So tell us about this.
Eventually, we have, I would call it the vacation from hell. And this is towards the end of our relationship. We did get married in there at some point. We did have a wedding. The destination wedding came back. I mean, life just kind of moved on forward as always. And, that summer, there were two different incidences that had to do with me holding the map or whatever, the GPS I had on my phone to give us directions on where to go. And two different incidences, somehow we missed the turn, and I certainly didn't mean for us to miss that turn, but of course it was all my fault. The first time he pulled over, and this is when he was his rage was getting worse. He wasn't as monotone as he used to be. It was getting really bad, and I took my daughter to the car and we went to the park. There was a park nearby. He drove away. He was gone, I don't know, 45 minutes. This was in the mid 2015, 2014, I believe. And I'm assuming I must have had a cell phone. I probably tried to call him and he didn't return for a good 45 minutes. And then we just went in the car. It was awful. We went to go see our friends that we were with at the Airbnb. It was very tense. And then that happened again later in the summer. We were going on a camping trip. We were took a wrong turn. It was my fault. I would always apologize. And then also, of course, he would accuse me of being defensive. And that time he pulled over to the side of the road, grabbed a napkin, and this time he was raging and yelling. And on that napkin, he wrote out a contract of all the things, and it stated all the different things I had to change in order for us to remain married before he would ask for a divorce. And I did not want a divorce. So I signed that little napkin contract, I would say under duress, but I was absolutely beside myself. I did not want that divorce. I did not want him to leave me.
Would it mean that you're a failure?
Yeah, I felt like I look at it as if I can fix myself, I have some power and control here. I just need to fix myself and do better. And it gives me that sense that I have some control in this marriage, in that relationship. I mean, I know now really I was powerless all along because there was no making him happy. And like you stated, he changed the goalposts all the time. I didn't stand a chance. I didn't know that at the time. I was desperately I would do anything for him and to save the marriage and just for him to see me as a good, loving wife that I believed I was.
So that belief of you being a good wife, is this a good wife, a good mother, a good family person, this thing you always wanted to be, that belief is carrying you through everything because right now you're living in someone else's world. You're not living in your world. There's this uneven ground, and you need that approval of this is what you are, and you're holding on to that belief, it sounds like. So the relationship is going to continue because you need that approval from him to be whole. Is that correct?
Oh, you've nailed it. It's that word approval. Exactly. I did. I wanted to feel approved by him. I've never heard it quite said that way. Yes, that's what it meant to me to be a good wife, is if he would approve of me. And he would never. And to this day, no, I never knew I would never get his approval. So I do sit him down. I said to him at one point later that summer, I said, I will put my needs on the back burner And I'm knee deep in motherhood. I mean, my needs are already on the back burner. There isn't a need that has been met in a long time. But I will stretch myself thinner and put even more of my needs on the back. And he agreed. He said that was a great idea. That's what we should do. We need to focus on him. And I would go into intensive therapy. I would work on myself. And if I made some changes, then we will see if we can carry on and not get divorced. So I go to my therapy. And then I think the second session, he stayed up really late. He typed it out on his computer, printed off a document that both sides had a list of things he wanted me to make changes on, and he wanted me to bring that to my therapist. And I did wholeheartedly with good intentions, handed it over to my therapist, double-sided of a list of things he needed me to change so that he could grow to be the man he wanted to be within a 5-year plan. If I made these changes in this list of things, he stated he would be a better husband because of it. He'd be a better son because of it. He would be a better employee and because of it, and he'd be a better father. It was a lot of pressure, but I thought, okay, I can do this. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And my therapist that day, she took a look at that and she kind of laughed and said she's going to take a different approach with me. And she did help me. You know, she started asking me what it is, what do I want, and how do I see this marriage moving forward under those parameters. And I think I knew at that point this was a losing game, and that she did give me some encouragement, and she helped me feel empowered a little bit so that when I'd go home and we'd get into these ridiculous arguments again, I did feel a little bolder at times because now I had also my therapist's voice in my head. And of course, my then husband did not like that and demanded I not go see her anymore. Of course, he did not like hearing that she was empowering me. And now he's also kind of at a weird stage of his life where he is diving further into this part of masculinity where he starts having conversations with me where he wants to be the head of the household, the leader of the household. So this new shift in his beliefs had changed during this time. And I do remember he started reading this weird book about masculinity and self-improvement, which I thought I was encouraging of at the time, but I actually think now that book was more about, I mean, there's a disclaimer at the beginning of the book that basically says there's a good chance that your relationship will break up, will dissolve after reading this. It's just basically an author who encourages men to be more controlling of their wives. There's a chapter in that book that states how a husband should treat his spouse like a pet, like a dog, and give your dog, you only give your spouse treats when they behave well, and you withhold treats when they misbehave. I mean, that just fell right in line with how he was already treating me. He would withhold affection. He would tell me outright, I will refuse giving you any kind of affection until you change your poor behavior. I mean, and that the goalpost was changing every day. So I didn't even know at this point how I could change my behavior anymore. And then the conversations of I'm delusional, I'm not objective, basically calling me crazy all the time. And I was feeling crazy. He wasn't wrong. I thought I was going mental at this point. I thought I was losing my mind. He was still threatening divorce, which was always a very scary word to me. And then one time I had this light bulb moment that went into my head. And I thought, you know what? If he thinks I'm really this crazy and delusional, then I shouldn't have my child in my care. And that is when it struck a nerve. So when it threatened my motherhood and my ability to be a mom to my daughter, I knew something was wrong. I couldn't pinpoint it, but I knew something was wrong, and this can't be right. I can't be that crazy. Otherwise, why would he entrust me with our daughter? He goes to work every day. Why would he leave her with me? And I know I love her very much. She's my whole world. I've been at home, a stay-at-home mom up until now. And I had this sick feeling that if I'm truly this crazy, delusional woman that he says I am, then I shouldn't have my child. I need to give her to someone that can properly care for her, at least until I get help. And that was enough to kind of shake me up. And so at that point, I think I went into more of an acceptance state. that our marriage was dissolving and that I had to give up the fight, and he wanted a divorce, and let him have the divorce. And so, that was the end, and that was the beginning of settling things and separation and writing up separation agreements. It was very painful, but I just couldn't live with myself knowing that I could possibly be an unfit mother. And I didn't think I was. I think I knew enough. That's the trigger point for me, where I had a wake up call in my own mind that I knew I was a good mom. I mean, of course, I'm not always the best, but I was a good, loving, nurturing caregiver to my daughter. I was her mother, and her needs were number one.
So now you're ready for this divorce process. So what happens from here?
Yeah, so we do the typical. We try to live together. He moves into the basement, and, it's terrible. He moved out for a bit, and then he moved back in for Christmas so we could have Christmas. It was stressful. He inevitably moved out again. The next stage of our life will be co-parenting. Oh, wow. Was that a funny thought? Yeah, I'm a very agreeable person, so I did agree to almost everything he wanted. We have our 50-50 custody. We divide all our assets, and now we are, almost 10 years out, and things have still been interesting. A few years after divorce, my daughter said something about the woman that he was dating, and without knowing, my daughter basically told me that that woman had been in her father's life. According to the timeline, we were still married. So I have every reason to believe that my daughter's father was having an affair, and that is why he was so pushing the divorce towards the end quicker than I thought he would. Because I wonder if that's because he had his affair partner lined up. I did ask my ex-husband once after divorce, had he had an affair, the woman that he's with currently, and they're married now. So, and he would just say to me, well, what does it matter now? He wouldn't answer the question, what does it matter now? So I guess there's my answer. I had no idea, absolutely no idea that he was having an affair. So that's information that came out later after divorce. So that hurt, like after everything he put me through, he was even having an affair, like, and then more post-divorce nonsense. So we were very agreed upon how we would raise our daughter. These were some points in our marriage that we were agreeable on. It was our belief system. We had a very similar belief system at the beginning. And when I was pregnant, we would read parenting books, and we had talked about how our parenting style would be and how we would raise our daughter. And knowing my background, especially with religion, we both agreed adamantly. I mean, we had conversations with our friends about how we would raise her in a non-religious household, in a very open and accepting household, somewhat of a skeptic. I wanted her to think for herself. And we were 100% agreeable. Well, somewhere along the way, he gets caught up in some weird type of cult. This is post-divorce. He's involved in a cult. And then during COVID times, these churches were locked down. They were not allowed to meet. They were supposed to all do it over Zoom. But anyway, this particular cult, I call it a cult, and I have my reasons. They started meeting in secret, and so they go on that's farm. So now I call it the farm church. And one day, my daughter, she's about 9 years old, and she said she was dunked underwater in a cow's trough. So they had baptized my daughter without my permission, and they were secretly taking my daughter to this cult church, and my daughter had been hiding it from me. I guess she knew not to say anything, and they had told her not to say anything. And, I guess that's just his way of getting back at me. I don't know what the purpose of this would be. It was awful, like knowing that I have this complicated relationship with my religious background, and knowing that him and I made that agreement. We were going to raise our daughter in one direction, one type of way. And now it's not like he just took her to a church. He's attempting to indoctrinate her. And I have a real problem with that. So that's really upsetting. And there's just nothing I can do. I mean, I can only hope that I'm influencing her in a positive way on the weeks that she's with me, and that she's a good girl, that she will make her, educated choices in the future. about what her belief system might look like, but that she won't be so heavily influenced. I don't know. Another thing that came out of this is, and I was hesitant to share, but I started receiving letters in the mail post divorce. I'm now with my new partner. I have met someone and we had moved in, and I'm starting to get letters in the mail, and they're handwritten letters, and they're basically insinuating that someone is having an affair with my new partner that I'm in a relationship with, and I bring it to his attention, and we can't figure out who these letters are coming from. They're like handwritten letters, no return address. I call the non-emergency police line just to see if this is considered a crime. Is this considered stalking? And it's, I was told this is called a form of harassment. And these letters came twice a week in my mailbox for almost 2 years. And there were letters written in there about my kids, my daughter, and then also my stepson that I am now helping to raise as well. He was just a young kid. And so these letters were giving descriptions about my children. And anyway, I have every reason to believe that was my ex-husband and his new wife that were harassing me. I did send a letter to my lawyer, and my lawyer sent a letter to their lawyer, his lawyer. And interestingly enough, when all that happened, the letters immediately stopped. So, I assume it was them just harassing me, causing issues in my new relationship. And I don't understand why. I just don't understand what the purpose, because he got his divorce. He's moved on with this affair partner. They ended up getting married. Why they want to hurt me and torment me, I guess it's just because it's just that last little bit of control and a way to affect me, I guess. It's hurtful, but it makes for an interesting post-divorce life. And I guess, for those of us that share custody of children with these kind of men, it never stops. And it's just a way to get at me under my skin and hurt me.
And what is your life like now? You have all of those things going on. You've dealt with abuse your whole entire life. So, what has your healing process been in the aftermath of everything?
Yeah, like I said, I met a new man about 4 or 5 years after post-divorce. We've been together now for a few years, and we recently, about a year and a half ago, we got married. So I am on marriage number 3. I never thought it would happen. I never thought I'd be that kind of woman that would have 3 marriages. I do struggle with that. There's some shame that comes in there. Thankfully, my friends and family are so supportive. No one judges me. I'm my own worst. I judge myself the worst. My new husband is amazing, and I have lots of love and support now in my life. And my daughter will be 14 soon, and she is thriving. I check in with her sometimes and I ask her, where could I improve as a mom? And most of the time, the only answer she has is she wishes she would have more iPad time or and of course, I will say no to that. I like to keep that under control, but she is a lovely child. She makes me very proud, and I think she's got a good head on her shoulders, and I'm just still so blessed to be her mom.
And if you had any words of wisdom for everyone listening, what would they be?
I know oftentimes people say listen to that inner voice or listen to your gut or look for the red flags. And I can't say I have a great inner voice. I don't have good instincts. I'm just okay to admit that now in my life. I think I'm lucky that I have a great husband, and I'm very lucky that I have these wonderful friends around me. Sometimes listening to my instincts took me down the wrong path. I'm still working on that. So I'm not ready to rely on my instincts, but I do have one little trigger in me that tells me if I'm on the right path or the wrong path. And that is when I feel like I have to fight for love, when I have to feel like I have to prove my worth, I know something is wrong. And that's my guide. So maybe that is my instinct. Maybe that is a form of an instinct that I have now. And so I was talking over with a really good friend, and she helped me come to that conclusion. She said, well, you shouldn't have to ever fight for love. And I'm like, you're right. I have fought hard my whole life for love. And, in this relationship, in my new marriage, it's been pretty easy. I just get love. I just am loved. And I'm not trying to be perfect. I don't have to try to be perfect. I don't have to worry. that if I mistreat someone or I say something in the wrong tone, that love is going to be taken away. That love still sits there, it still stays there, and I don't feel like I have to fight for it. So I think that is my advice. If anyone is ever in a relationship where they are feeling like they have to fight for love or fight for that approval, like you said, it's probably a sign something's not right.
Well, Helena, I really want to thank you for being our guest today, sharing your story, and really diving into, as you said, the fight for love and wanting and needing this approval and living in a world of someone who liked the power and control that was going on and was looking for someone who they could subjugate in every way and that they could be the truth teller to you in their world. And they were constantly having you move from goalpost to goalpost to goalpost using gaslighting, kernels of truth to make you feel defective, to keep you in this relationship thinking you needed to be approved when you weren't defective at all. And then one day, some of the wiring, let's say like your operating system to work, some of its code, he didn't really plan on. And you knew deep down that you were a good mom, even though he tried to make you think otherwise. And even though you really wanted a family and you wanted this family to stay intact, that little code that you had in you said, no, like this, something here isn't right. And you knew you were a good mom, and you fought through all of that pain, that belief right there. You fought through all of those systems right there to get to where you are now. And I'm happy that you are here. I'm happy that you are out and that you're finally going to be able to live a life free of all of these things and just take care of you and get the approval you need just from being you, on your terms, because that's all you need to be.
And that's where I'm at. I feel like I am me. And I mean, of course, I will always try to do my best and not hurt anyone. But at the end of the day, this is me. And I'm okay with that.
Well, thank you once again for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Helena, for being our guest once again. And if you want to be a guest like Helena was today, go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Click on the guest form button at the top of the page. Fill out our guest form, press the submit button, or email us at narcissistapocalypse@pm.me. Also at our website, we have a newsletter. Our newsletter has a lot of interesting things about this episode that are helpful reflections. Plus, we have a free workbook inside. Everything is free. Join it at narcissistapocalypse.com. And we also have support groups too at narcissistapocalypse.com. Every Wednesday night, Thursday afternoon, and Saturday night, we have support groups on Zoom. So join our support group today. And that is it for today's episode, today's survivor story. So for myself and Helena, we hope you have a good night.